TCI is brought to you by Spendthrift Stallion Medal Count, the last classic placed son of Dynaformer at stud. First foals are now on the ground.
Welcome back to TCI, your inside track to the Triple Crown. Alongside Joel Cunningham, I'm John Siegel. Well, Joel, we have a little better understanding of who's going to run in this year's Belmont. So, of course, that's going to affect the TCI top 10. Let's take a fresh look and let me know what you think now that we know who's headed that direction.
We're kind of getting closer, right, to this field of 13 or 14 that's shaping up, John. We've had a few names defect, had a few names that have come into the picture. You know, the most meaningful one to me is Irish Warcry. Very interesting horse, son of Curlin. We'll dig into the pedigree aspect of it a little bit with him. So for me, I've got to take your guns off. You know, he hasn't worked since the Peter Pan for Chad Brown. It looks like now Chad Brown is counting on his other horse, Twisted Tom, who's an interesting horse for me. Liked his work the other day, liked the pedigree play in here, so he moves up a little bit for me. Gormley, a horse that, you know, I thought he had to put in a decent work the other day, a horse that has some interesting stamina numbers, you know, based on the fact he's a Grade 1 winner, multiple Grade 1 winner. I'm going to move him into the top 5 now. And then you have True Timber in here, maybe a pace presence for Kieran McLaughlin. Senior Investment, obviously third place finisher in the Preakness. He'll move on the list for me as well, John. So that's what my list of 10 is looking like right now. I do think we're going to get 13 or 14 in the field.
All right, well, this is a show where we really dive into the pedigrees because we really believe that you have to be bred to excel at a 1.5 miles. Yeah. You know, there's very few horses that are going to just win a 1.5 miles on talent alone. So if you look at some of the things that we use the dosage index and we also use the Tomlinson numbers. I want to look back at a few years worth of the Belmont Stakes and kind of explain to the viewers what they're seeing here. I'll kind of step out of the way a little bit and explain a little bit about what we're seeing here on this chart.
Well, first of all, I'll just say since the turn of the millennium, since 2000, we've had 16 Belmonts, obviously. And the favorite has only won 3 out of 16 times. Wow. And we've had some monster long shot outcomes that were really unbelievable in terms of, you know, the fact that the winners, you know, like the Tara winning at 38-1 is a 1X type horse, never won again in his life, I don't believe. You know, Ruler on Ice, same thing. You know, a horse coming from a lesser circuit, 25-1 there. You know, why are we having so many of these double-digit prices winning this race, and why have so many favorites run poorly in this race? Now, there's several theories out there why. I personally believe that the most daunting thing, or the theory that is daunting for a lot of these favorites and maybe beneficial to some of these long shots, is just the fact that some were bred to handle a 1.5 miles better than others. And some of these favorites maybe weren't bred so well to handle the distance, and as they went through the Triple Crown grind, they emptied out, and that distance really exposed them. I just think if you believe in this show and anything we're going to talk about, and we do this show every year, John, we talk about these Belmont horses, you first have to respect the difference in distance between 1.25 miles and 1.5 miles. If you don't respect that, you're not going to respect anything we talk about today. But in North America, the way pedigrees have gone through the generations now, our route horses are based on Grade 1 winners that are probably winning 1 1/8 type races.
Right.
Okay, so they stretch out a little further beyond that, 1/8 of a mile, and they handle the Derby distance now pretty adequately, 1.25 miles. You go to Belmont, a big racetrack, big sweeping turns, you know, sandy surface, you stretch out another 1/4 mile to 1.5 miles, that is significant in my opinion. So, you know, you could get a hot day. You got a lot of these horses, you know, take this year's field, for example, Classic Empire. We talked about it. It's going to be his 4th race in 8 weeks. He's basically averaging a race every 2 weeks. It'll be his 4th race in his 4th different state, 4th different distance. We've seen this story before with horses like that. So I just think it's worth looking at the pedigree numbers. So that's what we'll do in this show.
Well, tell me here, just before we leave this chart, tell me what is it that you're looking for in the dosage index? What number are you looking for? Because right now this probably just looks like a lot of numbers to a lot of the viewers. Tell me what we're looking for and why some of the favorites didn't seem to excel.
Yeah, I've said in past shows, and I'll maintain, I'd like to see a dosage of 3.0 or under at a 1.5 miles distance. That shows a depth of stamina in the female family. And I do prefer the dosage index over the Tomlinson number. And really, those are the only two quantitative measures that we have in this business that everybody has access to. Now, I do take style into consideration, you know, a lot of times. Do I really feel like it's a horse that can go a mile and a half based on their physical makeup, based on their racing style. You have to take that in consideration. I do like the fact, you know, a horse has a race over the Belmont surface, a horse coming in fresh. I give extra credit for that, John, but I really think the dosage number is very important. It's been a common theme in a lot of these horses. Look at Creator. He actually had a monster Tomlinson last year. He qualified for us. And he qualified based on his dosage index, in my opinion, 3.0. American Pharoah is the only outlier that you'll see here, and frankly, the only outlier that we've seen in some time, dating below this list even. You know, we talked about it. He looked phenomenal. The best we have ever seen him was before the Belmont Stakes physically. So he was on his A game. I think the speed was holding, the rail was holding that day at Belmont. You typically see more of a fair racetrack. Speed was on that day. There was no pace in the race. He was on top of his game. I picked Mubtahiz that year, who I think ran 3rd or 4th in there. But American Pharoah strutted his stuff. He's a great horse, John. I just think in most scenarios, if the track's playing fair, it's a larger type field, you know, you're typically not going to see your Derby and Preakness winner thriving the way American Pharoah was. And so you start throwing other factors into it here. He's the outlier. You know, he's the horse with a 4.33 dosage index number that actually got it done. Most of these other horses, California Chrome off the board with 3.29, Exaggerator, I think he ran dead last with 3.40. Orb, well beaten, I think 3rd with a 3.21. Doulahan, nowhere to be found as the favorite. Huge dosage number. Now, Animal Kingdom qualified, but as we know, he fell on his face coming out of the gate, almost lost his rider, had a horrible trip. I think it was a sloppy track that year, so you can forgive his performance. But I will point out the horse that benefited qualified, even though he didn't come in and with near the form of some of these others. He was the benefactor with a 2.56. He got the job done over, I think, Stay Thirsty that year. You look down here too, Icebox. You know, everybody thought, oh, they love to bet these deep closers like Icebox and Doulahan, thinking, oh, well, they're going to keep going in a mile and a half. That's not true. Icebox was not bred to handle the distance. Same thing, Mind That Bird. Actually, the other Birdstone was bred a lot better, 2.56. He won easily. Mind That Bird did not run well with a 4.33. Big Brown, we know what happened to him. He was pulled up in the stretch for whatever reason there. But the horse that benefited, 2.43, a 1X son of Tisnau Datara, got the job done that year, John. So I just think there's something to be said here about pedigree in terms of maybe eliminating some short price horses that you think may not see out that mile and a half distance, and then giving credit to a horse that maybe hasn't shown as much talent or ability, but at the mile and a half distance is bred better to excel, and in this type of race scenario could pull an upset.
All right, so this was kind of a historic look at the Belmont just through the last few years. Let's take a look at last year's Belmont, and let's give the viewers a little explanation and really just kind of put our money where our mouth is when it comes to what we believed last year. This is the exact graphic that we had in last year's show. So take it from here and kind of explain what we were seeing there.
Yeah, so these are how we graded them out last year. Obviously green's good, yellow's solid, and red is what we don't like to see in the pedigree numbers. Your favorite, Exaggerator. I think your second choice was Sudden Breaking News, and I think Cherry Wine was your third choice, John. They ran 9th, 11th, and 7th. Were never really a factor in the race. You look at the 3 that qualified for us, in my eyes, based on the pedigree and style, and Destin, Creator, and Brody's Cause were in that group. Now, Brody's Cause did not run well, and I don't think he ever ran again. I think he retired after that race. But Destin and Creator fired. I think the Exacta paid over $250, John. I mean, Creator was a double-digit price. Destin was a solid price in here. And then you even go down to third place finisher Lonnie, who I thought had a terrible trip. Very easily could have won the race with a better trip. You know, he's in there, you know, completing the trifecta. So you can find clusters here in some of this information, in my opinion, that has a track record at this point. We've been doing this show for, what, 7, 8 years now. And the reason we use this system is it's worked. Maybe one day it will no longer be relevant and we'll get away from this. But until that day comes, until I've seen that, I'm not willing yet to get away from this system because again, we don't breed horses to go a mile and a half. So it's an act of attrition, in my opinion, that final quarter of a mile. You're not going to see any brilliant finishes in the Belmont Stakes, in my opinion. You're going to see the race one at the quarter pole, and you're going to see a grind fest that final quarter of a mile, an act of attrition to the wire. who has the depth of stamina in their female family to get it done, to be moving best that final quarter of a mile? That's what I want to know, and I think these numbers they can tell you that.
Well, so we're looking at last year's. Let's go ahead and let's look at this year's numbers on the horses that we think will run in the Belmont Stakes. And then you tell me, I see only 2 horses in green here this year,
yeah.
So it's a pretty short list of horses that are in the green, and then quite a few in the yellow and the red.
Yeah, absolutely, John. I mean, it sort of narrows it up in terms of who I think the top 2 qualifiers in here are, and that's Epicharis and Twisted Tom, the other Chad Brown horse. I mean, Chad Brown, he might win this race, you know, back-to-back classics. His first 2 classics was sort of outsider-type horses, and I think Twisted Tom, particularly coming off a pretty good work last weekend where we worked with Economic Model, a horse that's running the Met Mile. I think Twisted Tom is a local horse coming in on a win streak, bred to handle the distance, obviously. He's by Creative Cause out of a point, I think it was a Thunder Gulchmere rather. Depth of stamina in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th dam as well, and you see it reflect in the numbers. Now, the asterisk in the Tomlinson just means that Creative Cause, the sire, doesn't have enough sample size out there to feel confident in their number, and you'll see some asterisks here. Okay. But still, the 1.13 dosage number, I mean, that's a very low dosage number. That is bred in the purple to be able to handle the distance like the Belmont going 1.5 miles. So you look at Twisted Tom's form, you say, well, he's coming from Maryland. He's won a couple stakes there against bad horses. You know, his Beyer numbers are very weak compared to a horse like Classic Empire. It has all the back class, but he's doing well right now, John. He's coming in the race the right way on an upswing. He's coming in off a good work. He's locally trained, and I think he'll handle 1.5 miles. So at a monster price here, I do think Twisted Tom's worth a look. And Epicharis, he comes in with some class. I mean, this horse is undefeated in Japan. Very good run-out performance in UA Derby, in my opinion. I thought that was a pretty good race. They said if you were looking at a Beyer and the winner in that race, the Beyer would have been around a 95 that day for the Dubai horse. So, and he just got beat what a nose at the wire. So if you figure he can run in the 90 Beyer speed figures, you look at the 1.20, it's that Sunday Silence paternal line, and he has a pretty significant European stamina-laden female family there. I think Epicharis, with his tactical speed, is the horse to beat in this year's Belmont.
Well, I'll tell you one more horse I wanted to talk about because it really surprised me, and that's Gormley. I was surprised to see his dosage index so good. Yeah. You know, you kind of see him. He looks a little bit more of a miler type. He really He's does. By Malibu Moon. Right. I was really surprised to see him so like high on the dosage index there.
Yeah, no question, because Malibu Moon has that Stormcat influence, or Mr. P influence rather, in his pedigree, and a lot of his horses do typically have a higher dosage number. With the Bernstein, and you start digging in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th dam of Gormley's pedigree, you'll see some stamina influences there, John, and you see it reflected in the number, 2.25. I think Orb, going back to another quality son of Malibu Moon, Orb, I think, came in as your favorite the year that Palace Malice, and we picked Palace Malice to win the Belmont that year. Orb, I think, at a 3.21. So he definitely did not have, even though it was that old Phipps female family, you know, with stamina, I think Orb is out of an unbridled mare. You'd think he'd run all day. Actually wasn't true. Gormley has a better stamina number. And the fact he's a multiple Grade 1 winner, I give him a shot. I put him really qualifying at the top of this yellow group here. And there's some other interesting horses here. I'm not a fan of Senior Investment, a one-run closer going 1.5 miles, in my opinion. Irish War Cry, son of Curlin, technically qualifies and a solid, even though you know, you're talking about a pretty solid Tomlinson number, 338 here. Taprit technically qualifies. Now, he's out of a very sprint-oriented female family. He looks like a classic horse physically, but I really question whether or not Taprit is going to be like Creator or Toneless that can dig it out at 1.5 miles. And Patch is interesting for me because he has a style I like. He's a grinder. I love grinders in this race, John. A horse that can just clip along those 12.5 second furlongs and give it to you all the way to the wire. He qualifies technically, and you know, there's an asterisk because Union Rags doesn't quite have enough progeny out there running it, and certainly not a lot of them have run 1.5 miles at this point, right? Because they're just 3-year-olds right now. But the fact he's by Union Rags a Belmont winner, and the fact that he is out of the dam sire is a Belmont winner, AP Indy, and I think the second dam sire, I believe, is Unbridled. So a lot of stamina, I believe, in his family too. So he's a 3.0. When you combine that with his style, I'm interested a little bit in Patch.
Well, Joe, I appreciate you taking the time to lay all this information out. And like you said, you don't always pick the winner of this race, but we usually can get, you know, it's helpful to know who we think might not win the race. You can throw out some pretty serious some pretty serious favorites right there.
I mean, we did this with California Chrome, right? We did this with, who else did we do that? We did this with American Pharoah, and we failed. I picked Move Tahitian, I was wrong. But we did it with California Chrome. We did it with Exaggerated. We've done it with several horses in the 6-7 years we've been doing this. And I'll tell you what, Classic Empire, 5.0 dosage number. He's the son of Pioneer of the Nile, like American Pharoah. His numbers are even higher than American Pharoah's. It's hard for me to like him his 4th race in 8 weeks when he qualifies like this from a stamina standpoint. Looking at Lee, he's going to take money. Everybody thinks, well, he's a deep closer, he'll have a 1.5 miles. We've proven that's not the case. He needs a stamina in his family. I personally don't like him. So there's some horses in here that are going to be pretty short prices I think you can throw out. I mean, Classic Empire, he'll be even money, John. If our system works, he won't be anywhere to be found.
All right, Joel, well, thank you. I look forward to seeing who you pick next week.
Yeah, man.
Make sure you guys come back next week. Like I said, we'll pick who we think is going to win this year's Belmont Stakes.